Hello.
Good morning, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about what is EC2 service in the AWS cloud and why we need to go for EC2 service. So EC2 is used to create virtual servers in the AWS cloud. So in order to create a virtual server in the AWS cloud, you need to go with the AMI. You need to choose AMI. AMI represents the configuration that is required for the machine, like what kind of operating system we need for the machine will be represented by AMI. And instance type, so what type of machine, how much RAM you want for your machine, that can be decided by using this instance type. Key pair, which is used to connect with the machine securely. And once we connect with the machine, which traffic we need to allow for the machine, that we can decide by using security group. Inbound rules and outbound rules will be available. Then we are able to launch one EC2 and we are able to connect with that Linux machine by using SSH client. And we are able to see types of IPs in the AWS cloud. So public IP, private IP, elastic IP is available. And we have seen what is user data in the AWS cloud. When you are launching a machine, if you want to execute some initialization script, then you can go for user data. And the next one, what is load balancer? Load balancer is used to distribute the load to multiple servers. Okay. If you keep deploy your application in only one server, then burden will be increased on the server. To reduce that burden, we are going to use load balancer concept to distribute that load. And the next one, auto scaling is available. So instead of we are deciding the number of servers, we are going to use auto scaling concept. When we use auto scaling concept, then it will identify the number of servers required based on the traffic we are having for our application. Perfect. And the next one, in the AWS, there is a service called RDS service is available. Okay. I have given one video also. How many of you gone through that video and practiced RDS service? How many of you gone through that video and practiced the RDS service? AWS RDS guys. How many of you practiced? Could you please respond in the chat box? Did you practice or you did not practice RDS? Ravindra completed. Okay, what about the remaining people? What about the remaining people? If all of you practiced, I will go for next service. All of you practiced or not practiced? Some people have not practiced. Why? Very clear video I have given. Why you guys not practiced? Some people are saying they have not practiced. Lazy people. Okay. Now, see here, guys. So when we talk about RDS, RDS stands for RDS stands for Relational Database Service. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. RDS is fully managed service in the AWS cloud. RDS is fully managed service in AWS cloud. So database configuration, database administration, database backup, everything will be taken care by AWS cloud. In the AWS, there is a service called RDS service available. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. RDS is fully managed service in the AWS cloud. Fully managed service in the AWS cloud. By using RDS service, we can set up relational databases. We can set up relational databases. When I say relational databases, Oracle comes into relational database, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, all these kind of databases we can configure by using AWS. Okay, so in the AWS there is a service called RDS service available. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. RDS is fully managed service in the AWS cloud. Using RDS service, we can set up relational databases in the cloud. Okay, relational database in AWS cloud. So what kind of relational databases available? Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server, like that. There are several relational databases available in the market. Why we need to go for cloud database? For every project, database is required. For every project, database is required. Why we need to go for cloud database? Sir, as part of our course, we are downloading the database and we are installing the database in our system only now. Then why we need to go for cloud database? Okay, so there are some challenges with the on-premises database. Why to go for cloud database? Why to go for cloud database? Why we are not downloading and installing the database in our system? Why we need to go for cloud database? Guys, what is the reason behind going for cloud database? Let's understand the scenario. So when you go for on-prem database, okay, we can use a database in two ways. For every application, database is required to store the data. For every project, database is required, which is used to store the data permanently. We can use database in two ways. One is called on-prem database, another one is called cloud database. When we are developing a project, for every project, database is required to store the data permanently. And the database we can use in two ways. One is called on-prem database, another one is called cloud database. So what are the problems available if you go with the cloud database? There are some challenges available with the on-prem database. Okay, on-prem database means you download the database and you install the database in your system. That is called on-premises database. So when you go for on-prem database, what are the challenges available? The first challenge, we need to take care of the database server. We need to take care of the database server. That means we need to download and install database server on our own. We need to download and install database server on our own. So if you are going for enterprise database, then we need to purchase the database license. If you are going for enterprise, we need to purchase the database license, and we need to take care of our database security. We need to take care of our database security, and we need to take care of database backup. We need to take care of database backup. So if you want to maintain your own database, then that database is called on-premises database. So when you go for on-premise database, these are the challenges available. Can you read the challenges? Are you able to understand what are the challenges available with the on-premises database? We need to take care of our database server. We need to take one machine. In that machine, we need to install the database server. We need to download and install that. We need to purchase the database license. We need to take care of the security for the database, and we need to maintain backup of the database. So to overcome all these challenges, people are going to use cloud databases. To overcome the challenges of on-prem database, people are going to use cloud databases. Able to follow me? So why to go for cloud database? Okay, so in the application, we need to store the data. For our application, we need one database. Okay, for every application, database is required to store the data permanently. We can use the database in two ways. One is called on-prem database, another one is called cloud database. What are the challenges with the on-prem database? When you configure the database on your own, you need to take care of the database server. We need to download and install that server. we need to take a separate computer and we need to set up the database in that. We need to purchase the license. We need to secure the database. We need to maintain the DB backup. So to overcome all these challenges, we are going for cloud database. So how to use cloud database? Okay. So there is a cloud database providing by AWS by using a service called RDS. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. It is fully managed service in the AWS cloud. Using this RDS, we can set up relational databases in the cloud. So what is the advantage when you go for this cloud database, guys? So what is the advantage of going with the cloud database? So when we go for cloud database, AWS will take care of our database administration. Okay. So AWS cloud will take care of our database administration in terms of database license, database security, database backup. Everything will be taken care by AWS people only. We just need to use the database given by AWS. So the database security, database network, database license, database backup, database administration, everything will be taken care by cloud people. Can you please read about RDS now? Can you please read about RDS? RDS stands for Relational Database Service. RDS is a fully managed service in the AWS cloud. Using RDS service, we can set up relational databases in the AWS cloud like Oracle, MySQL, Postgres, SQL Server we can set up in the AWS. If we use RDS, then AWS will take care of our database administration, license, security, backup, etc. So here RDS works based on pay as you go model. RDS is not free of cost, guys. So RDS is a fully managed service in the AWS cloud. On hourly basis, bill will be generated for this. RDS works based on pay as you go model. So that means whatever the database that you create, how many hours you will run the database, based on that the charges will be generated. So that's why we are going to call RDS works based on pay as you go model. So what is the meaning of pay as you go model? How many hours you will use that cloud database, then that will be chargeable. That will be chargeable. Are you able to understand my point? What is the difference between on-prem database and a cloud database? What is the difference between on-prem database and cloud database? Are you able to understand the difference? Yes. Okay. So if you go for cloud database, you no need to bother about security. You no need to bother about backup. You no need to bother about administration because AWS will take care of everything. They are giving the database for rent. Okay. Whatever the database we need, we can take the database for rent from the AWS cloud. How to create the database in the AWS cloud? Okay. Steps to create MySQL database by using RDS. So let me go to the AWS console. I logged in into AWS console. Okay. Here, go to the services concept. Go to the services concept in the AWS. You search for a service called RDS. Search for a service called RDS. Okay. So we are able to search for RDS, introducing RDS database service here. Go to the databases. Currently in my AWS account in the Mumbai region, no database instances available. That means database is not available in our application now. No instances found in, no databases available in this account. Now you can use one option, create a database. So click on create database. There are two ways to create. One is standard create is available. Another one is easy create is available. Anything you can choose. So options you can select. So I'm going to use database creation approach as easy create approach. So in the easy create approach, I'm using MySQL database. I'm selecting MySQL, one of the open source database. MySQL is free, but RDS is not free. So they are giving MySQL database with their management also, right? For the managing the database, they are charging. So it is RDS is paid service, guys. So I'm selecting RDS, creating database option, easy create. In this easy create, I'm choosing MySQL database. Then go for, do you want to go with database for production or database for testing, database for free tier? I'm using free tier. Even if you use a free tier, $0.02 per hour charges will be generated. Okay, they are going to take one T3 micro machine with 1 GB RAM, 20 GB storage will be available. So $0.029 bill will be generated per hour when you go for this cloud database. When you go for this cloud database, 0.02 USD dollar per hour. Even though if you are choosing free tier, this is the bill they are going to generate. Okay, database identifier, you can give the name for the database and database username. So master username, by default the username is admin. You can, if you want, you can change that also, no problem. Admin is available. Okay, managed secret credential management is available. So self-managed credentials. So what is the username is admin. What is the password? What is the password that you want to take for your database? I'm choosing my password for the database. Okay, fine. So self-managed credentials I'm using, password I'm selecting. Then here default settings for easy create, VPC, all these settings are coming by default when you go for easy create option. When you go for standard create option, you need to select all these details. Okay, so I'm going to show you creation process once again. Go to the database instances, go to AWS console, then you select one option called RDS option. You select one option called RDS option. So here RDS, managed relational database service. That means our database will be managed by AWS cloud. It is a paid service, pay as you go model. Click on RDS console. Okay, click on create database. Then go with easy create option. Select MySQL database type. What is the instance size you want? I want to free tier. Even if you select to free tier, the bill will be generated per hour $0.02. Identifier name, anything is fine. Username is admin. Credential management, self-managed credentials I'm using. So you can select a password for your database. Username is admin and password you can select. Then EC2 connection, that is optional. Default settings, as we are using easy create option, they are taking care of the default settings. Then click on create database. So password strength must be 8 characters. Okay, fine. Password did not match. Okay, click on create database. So with this, I'm creating my database, guys. Now you see database creation started. Now view credential details for my database. Username is admin. Password I have given Ashok IT DB password. So you need to note down the database credentials. Okay. Username is admin. Password is Ashok IT admin DB password. So login into AWS console. Login into AWS console. Okay. Now here, once the database creation is completed, how we are going to create? Login into AWS console, go to RDS service, click on create database, easy create option, MySQL, free tier, database identifier, you can give anything here, username admin, choose a secret credential, choose a password for that secret manager. So click on create database. When you click on the create database option, it will take few minutes of time to create the database. So note down the database username and password. Once the database is created, it will generate a URL to access the database. Okay, change the database to public access. enable all the traffic in the security group, attach it to the database. So these are the steps that we need to follow in order to create the database and in order to connect with the database. Now let us see here. First step, login into AWS management console. Yes, we have the account in the AWS. We will go into that AWS account. Then we will search for a service called RDS. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. Then click on Create Database. Options we are choosing. Easy Create option I have selected. I'm selecting the database type as MySQL, free tier only. Instance identifier, you can give anything. Default one also fine. Username, by default username is admin. Password, you choose your password. Then you click on Create Database. So it will take some time to create the database. Once the database is created, you can check your username and password. You can check your username and password. You note down your username and password. You note down your username and password. Okay. So once it is created, to connect with the database, one URL will be generated, guys. So note down your username and password. So database credentials. Note down your database credentials. So for my database, username is admin, password is Ashok ID DB password. You can give anything as a password, right? So username, default username only I am taking, which is admin. Password that I have selected, Ashok ID DB password. Now, so along with these things, we need a database URL that is called endpoint URL. From our application, if we want to connect with the database URL is required. So successfully created the database. Go to this database. So when you click on this database, right, you can see the endpoint. This endpoint nothing but the URL to connect with the database. Earlier, when you are developing the application, database URL you will give as a local host. Local host nothing but database is running in your system only. But now database is not running in my system. Database is running in the cloud. How to access a cloud database? To access the cloud database, we need to use endpoint URL. This is the URL of my database. This is username of my database. This is password of my database. Now, the database MySQL database runs on the protocol 3306 port number. Now you see, once the database is created, if you go here, if you click on the database here, it will show you endpoint. Endpoint nothing but the URL of the database and port number 3306. So to access our database, to access database, we need to enable to access MySQL database. To access MySQL database created in AWS cloud, we need to enable 3306 port number in security group inbound rules. Okay, for security purpose, security group rules will be available. We need to enable security group inbound rules. So already we have seen for Linux machine, SSH protocol will be enabled. For HTTP, AT protocol will be enabled. Similarly, for the MySQL database, 3306 port number should be enabled. Okay, so to access the database, whatever the database I have created, in order to access this MySQL database in the cloud, we need to enable 3306 port number in the security group inbound rules. So when our Java application want to connect with the cloud database, so this is the process. We need to create the database in the cloud and we need to note down database username, database password and database URL. So these details we can configure in our project. Then our project can connect with the MySQL database. In order to connect with the MySQL database, we need to enable 3306 port number in the security group. So go to this database, security group is available, VPC security group. Open this security group, check the inbound rules. Okay, go to the security group and click on the security group ID. Inbound rules available. So already MySQL protocol is enabled. Okay, as we used easy create option, This protocol is already enabled by default. MySQL database type, protocol type, MySQL port number 3306 already enabled. Then we no need to enable it. Now I want to test it, whether this database is working as expected or not. So to test the database, we are going to use Workbench. To test the database, I'm going to use Workbench. Really, am I able to connect with this database or not? Right? Go to MySQL Workbench software. MySQL Workbench is a client software which is used to connect with the database server. Now what I have done, I have taken database in the AWS cloud, guys. So I have taken database in the AWS cloud. So this is my AWS cloud account. In this AWS cloud account, I used one service called RDS. Okay. In this RDS service, I created one MySQL DB. MySQL DB server I have created. Okay. RDS is a service in the AWS cloud. Using this RDS, I have created MySQL database server. I know database URL, username, and endpoint. Okay. Username of database I know. Password of database I know. URL of database also I know. By using these details, I can connect with the database. Okay. So I have my Windows machine. From my Windows machine, I want to connect with this database. Okay. To connect with this database, in the Windows machine, I will use one software called MySQL Workbench software. I will use one software called MySQL Workbench software. What is the purpose of this MySQL Workbench software? It is used to connect with the database server. So MySQL Workbench is DB client software. DB server is available in the AWS cloud. Using this Workbench, I can connect with the database to check my database is working as expected or not. So I have MySQL Workbench in my system. Using this MySQL Workbench, I will try to connect with the database which is available in the AWS cloud. If I am able to connect with the database available in the cloud, then I can use this database in my application also. Okay, so let me test the connection. Go to Workbench, click on MySQL connection. Okay, connection name, I can give here AWS RDS connection. Host name. Earlier, we are giving 127.0.0.1. That is local host. If database available in the local system, then you can give the host name as local host. But today, my database is not there on the local system. My database is available in the cloud system. So database URL is the host name. Copy endpoint of the database, go to Workbench and give the host name. Okay, port number 3306, username is admin, and password store in vault. So my password is Ashok IT DB password. Click on OK. Then test connection. Check it. Are we able to connect with the database or not? I'm testing this connection. It will tell whether connection is successful or not. It will tell whether connection is successful or not. It is taking time. I create a database in the cloud and I am testing whether am I able to connect with the database or not. So by giving the host name as endpoint URL, port number 3306, username is admin, password I stored here, click on test connection. It is hanging. Test connection option I have used. So once we are able to connect with the database, that means our database is ready. Click on OK directly. Yeah, database is connected. Opening this SQL editor. It is trying to connect with this database available in RDS. Once it is done, now the same credentials we can configure in our application. Then our connection cannot connect to the database server. Your attempt failed for the user. unable to connect with the port number. Okay, edit connection details, database endpoint URL. Connection is failed, guys. This is my database endpoint URL. Host name, username is admin, password, Ashok ID DB password. Okay, then test connection. I should get success here, whether connection is successful or not. It is slow, it is taking time. It is not giving any response. It is hanging. Generally, you will get the success response if you are able to connect with the database. Then you can create the table and you can insert the data. Security group is available for database. In that security group, inbound rules. This is a security group ID. It is failed to connect, guys. I am unable to connect. Security group inbound rules. Edit the inbound rules. SSH MySQL port protocol is enabled with the port number 3306. So there is no problem. Protocol side also we are good. Save the rule. Inbound rule is updated. I enabled MySQL inbound rule. Still connection is failing. Okay, got it, guys. I got it. I have not enabled public access for the database. So whenever you create the database, by default, it is not available for the public access. I need to change the database to public access. I'm failing to connect with the database because for this database, I have not enabled public access. Let me go to this RDS. Okay, and let me edit the database, whatever the database I have created. By default, the database is not available for public access. You see here, database publicly accessible, no. So outside people cannot connect to the database. Public access is no. So click on actions, click on edit. I need to give the public access for this database, guys. So here go and modify. When you go and modify here, there will be one option, public access, additional configuration, publicly access. By default, it is not accessible. I'm giving publicly accessible option. Okay, click on continue. Click on DB instance, apply immediately. Click on modified DB instance. So successfully I have modified my DB instance. I have given public access. Now test connection. Earlier public access was not enabled, that's why we are not able to connect to the database. Now I have enabled public access to the database. Okay, now we should be able to connect. So when you go for easy create option, by default public access is not enabled. So after database is created, we need to enable it. We need to enable it. Right. So let me delete this and let me create the new connection. Delete this connection. Let me create the new connection. So RDS is the connection name, the host name, that is endpoint URL. I'm giving this URL. Instead of localhost, give the endpoint URL. Username is admin and password. This is my DB password. Okay, test connection. We should get success message. I'm just testing whether I'm able to connect with my database or not. What happened? It is taking time to establish the connection. Click on OK. I think guys it is hanged. Let me reopen this one. There is no response from here. Let me kill this task. I closed my SQL workbench. Let me reopen. Yes, my SQL workbench is reopened. Delete it. Create the new connection. Host name, that is our endpoint URL. Username, which is admin. Password, which is Ashok IDDB password. Okay. This is my connection name, which is RDS. Test it. It is not responding. There is some issue with my system only. It is hanging. Okay. Open this database. Your connect cannot connect to the database. Please check MySQL running, default port number, providing password, correct password, address you are connecting from. Your connection attempt failed for admin to the MySQL server database, unable to connect. MySQL running or not? Yes, it is running. I have enabled public access also. Successfully, we have modified this. Zero connections, not able to connect. Open this. Endpoint configuration. Connectivity publicly accessible. Yes, is available. Double 306 port number. Why we are not able to connect? Public access is available. Port number is also enabled. security group, inbound rules. MySQL protocol is enabled. 3306 port number. There is no problem. DS. Let me create another database, guys. I'm going with the standard create option. MySQL standard create. I'm trying the new database. MySQL standard create. I'm taking database MySQL version. Free tier MySQL. I'm selecting. Identifier name is database 2. Credentials username is admin. Password I can give anything. I'm choosing the password. Okay. Then storage, allocated storage auto scaling, that is fine. Connectivity, default VPC we are using. Public access, yes, by default I'm selecting. Security group, default security group we are using. Additional configuration, what is the initial database name? I'm giving JRTP as my database name. That's it. Yeah. Check this one, guys. So I'm using standard create option. Engine type I'm selecting as MySQL. Then template I'm using free tier. Identifier is database 2. Username is admin. Password I have given self-managed password. We can see the password once the database is created. Then connectivity, don't connect to the EC2 machine. Currently default VPC we are using. Public access by default I'm selecting yes. Security group, default security group. In the additional configuration, port number 3306. Okay, in the additional configuration, initial database name I have given as a JRTP. Right. Then click on create. So new database I'm creating. Database 2 is getting created. Close this one. Let's wait for this. Database 1 is I'm deleting here, guys. So I'm unable to connect with this. I'm deleting database 1. Yeah, database 1 I have deleted. My database 2 is getting created. View the credentials of this database. Username is admin. Password I have given Ashok IT 2024. This is my password. Once this database is created, currently still not created. That's why endpoint is not available. Once the database is created, then we can check the endpoint URL. I have given public access as yes. We should be able to connect. Let's wait for this DB to be created. Still DB creation in progress. Once the database is created, then only the URL we can see here. That URL is called endpoint URL, which is used to connect with our database. still creating. Yeah, finally database is created and you can see the connection details here. Username admin, password available, endpoint also available. Let me note down my endpoint URL. This is my database endpoint URL. I will try to connect with these details now. Copy this URL and keep it here. Go to Workbench, delete this connection, create a new connection, connection name RDS, host name URL, username admin, password. Okay, click on test connection. Yes, now you can see successfully made the MySQL connection. So this time we are able to connect with the database successfully. So successfully made the MySQL connection, click on OK, click on OK. So with this my database connection got created. Now go to this database. If you double click on this, the SQL editor will open. So in that SQL editor, you can write the queries and you can perform operations on the database. Right? Connection created successfully, and let me open the SQL editor in order to connect with this. There is some issue with my Workbench only. It is very slow. Open connection. It should open a editor where we can write our queries. MySQL Workbench. Yeah. Opening the SQL editor. Yes. SQL editor is open. That means I'm able to connect with the database. So show databases. I have given the database name as JRTP. Show databases, which is JRTP database available. Use JRTP. Then show tables in the database. Show tables in the database. Currently there are no tables available in the database. You can create the table. Okay, so with this I have created the database. In the security group, the protocol is already enabled. Default security group na. In the security group, inbound rule 3306 is already enabled. That's why we are able to connect. If you see the inbound rules, my database security group inbound rule 3306 port number already enabled. So with this we are able to create the database and we are able to connect the database. Okay, so now this database creation will done by cloud team or DevOps team in the project. They will give the username, password, and database URL for you. You need to configure these details in the application. So earlier when we are connecting with the database, we will give username, password, URL. URL we will give as a local host because database also will be available in our system. From now, database will not be available in our system. Database will be available in the cloud system. So how we will configure this database in the Spring Boot application? Okay, when you take any Spring Boot application, application at properties file will be available. In the properties file, instead of giving our local host URL, we are going to give cloud URL. Okay, so if you see RDS application, the Spring Boot application, anything. If you take any Spring Boot application, WhatsApp API integration project is there. So in this application, if you see, the properties file will be available. Resources, application and properties file is available. In the application properties file, currently what I have given, username is root, password is root, local host I have given. So what we will do in this properties file now? So in this properties file, we are going to configure our cloud database. We are going to configure cloud database URL. So how we are going to configure a cloud database URL? Instead of local host, we are going to configure that endpoint URL, username and password. WhatsApp integration project is available, right? So in this project, in this Spring Boot project, if you go to the resources folder, in this resources folder, properties file is there. In this properties file, username, password, root. This is my local database. Now, if I want to connect with the cloud database, then I will give this username. I already taken the database credentials of the cloud database. Username, password, endpoint URL. Wherever you are using the local host, in the place of local host, we are going to give our cloud database URL. Okay. So here I'm going to give my cloud database URL. Instead of local host, give the cloud database URL. That's it. And the database name I have given as a JRTP. I can give the name as a JRTP. Username is admin. Password is Ashokit 2024 I have given. That's it. So with this, when I run this Spring Boot application, this application will connect with the cloud database. How it will know the cloud database? So username, password, URL. Earlier localhost is available. Now currently cloud endpoint URL is available. Now when I run this Spring Boot application, it will connect with the cloud database. Okay. So once your practice is completed, once you are able to create the database and check whether database is connected or not, then you can go and delete the database. Why? Because this RDS is not free. Hourly charges will be applicable for you. Once your practice is completed, you go to database, you select this one and click on action and delete the database. If you don't delete, then keep on, bill will be generated for every hour. Bill will be generated. RDS is a not free service. RDS is a paid service which will generate the bill based on pay as you go model. So we have seen for hour $0.029 amount they are charging for the RDS service. Why they are charging? Because this is a fully managed service. They will take care of our database security, database administration, database backup, database network, everything they are going to manage. So as they are managing all these things for us, they are charging for that. So that's why it is called paid service. It will work based on pay as you go model. Are you clear with my point? So you got the clarity. What is the difference between on-prem database and what is cloud database? What is the difference between on-prem database and cloud database? Right. So for every application, database is required to store the data. Database we can manage in two ways. One is on-prem database, another one is cloud database. On-prem database means downloading and installing the database on our own. So when you go for on our own DB setup, which is on-prem database, there are some challenges available. Database server backup, database server security, database server network, database administration, all these things we need to take care. So to overcome all these challenges, we are going to use cloud databases. So to set up a cloud database, we are using RDS service in the AWS. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. It is a fully managed service in the AWS cloud. Using this service, we can set up the databases in the AWS like Oracle, MySQL, Postgres you can set up. So if you use RDS, they will take care of our database management. They will take care of our database management basically. Management in the sense license, security, backup, etc. And this RDS is going to work based on pay as you go model. So this is the process we follow to create the database. You can use create database creation method. I'm using standard create. Public access, yes. I'm giving public access, yes, for this. Standard create option I used, engine MySQL, template free tier, database instance identifier, you can give anything. Username, default username admin. Password you can select. Public access, yes, I have given. Additional database configuration. Initial database name I have given as JRTP. Initial database name I have given as a JRTP. You can give any name for that. Click on create database. Then note down the username and password. Once it is created, it will provide endpoint URL. Okay, then as already we are giving public access, yes, no need of this step. Once the database is created, enable 3306 port number in security group inbound rules, which is belongs to our database. So for database, one security group will be available. In that security group, enable MySQL 3306 port number in the inbound rules. Once it is done, then you can note down these database credentials. Okay, then you can test whether database is working or not. So to test this database, we can use MySQL Workbench to test database connection is established or not. We can use MySQL Workbench to check database connection. Okay, we can configure above credentials in our Spring Boot application. In JDBC or in Spring Boot, any application you can configure in our Spring Boot application, so that Spring Boot application will connect with the cloud database. So the same thing I have given in the video, also a short video, how to create the database, how to test the connection, how to configure the database in the Spring Boot application. In this video I have explained. Some people has gone through that video, some people has not gone through that video. So in the class also I have done the same thing. Okay. Are you clear with my point? Are you able to understand how to work with this cloud database? Guys, when I give some task, please complete that before coming to the class. If you have gone through that video, we would have saved 1 day of time. I thought of explaining IAM service today, because I thought that all of you gone through that video and practiced RDS, but some people has not practiced it. So 1 day time waste. Whatever I have explained in the video, same thing I have explained in the class again. So what, there is no use of that, right? It's waste of our time. Self-learning skills you have to improve. Good. Fine. So with this, we are done with EC2 service and we are done with RDS service. But in the real time, who is responsible to set up this database, guys? Are we going to create the database in the real time? Are we going to create the database in the real time? Who will do that? Infrastructure team will be available. AWS team or DevOps team will be available in the real time. Those people are going to create this database in the AWS cloud. Infrastructure team, DevOps team will be available. Those people will do the setup of the database in the cloud and they will give these database credentials for us. Using these credentials, we will connect with the database. That's it. Once your practice is completed, you go here, select the database, action, you delete it. Okay, so create file. I'm removing all these snapshots, everything. I don't need any backup of this one. Delete me, click on delete. With this, my database is getting deleted. So once your practice is completed, you delete the database. So in the interview, they may ask a question. Do you know how to work with AWS RDS in our Spring Boot application? Yes. So we know how to create a database in the cloud and we can configure those details in the Spring Boot application. Then instead of using local database, we can also use cloud database. So everybody should have the idea on this cloud computing and cloud infrastructure. Everybody should have the idea on this cloud infrastructure and cloud computing, because nowadays all the companies are using this cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Nowadays all the companies are using cloud computing concepts only. Is this clear for everyone? So can we practice RDS now? Some people already practiced, some people not practiced. Can we practice it now? And I request all of you, when I give some task, please complete it. Yeah, perfect. Anybody having any questions, they can unmute and they can ask me. Anybody having any questions?
Hi, yes.
Sir,
Unmute and they can ask me. Yeah.
one generic doubt, sir. Like we were discussing the term on-prem for a couple of days, how we can host the on-prem environment into the global domain service, naming service, sir.
Sir, on-prem domain means they will take one Linux machine and they will install the database in the Linux machine only. That is on-prem.
Okay.
So that means a separate database team will be available. They will take one computer. In that computer, they will install the database and they will share that computer IP, username and password in order to connect with that database.
Okay.
That is called
Then,
on-prem database.
then how? Not that one, sir. If any service is there, if we are running on on-prem environment, how we will map the IP to the DNS?
So there is in the company internal network LAN connection will be available. With the LAN connection, we will access it. They will not map to IP. The
Okay.
machine will have the IP, right? That
Yeah.
IP address you can access within the company network.
Okay.
Yeah, Ashok, one question here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I think which will be, I think, cost effective for a small scale like application, whether cloud like RDS or on premises, because if you, I think we can't go for cloud for everything, right? I mean,
Yeah,
for
if your
one.
application is very small, it's simple scenario, sir. If you have the client billing, if client is okay to pay the bill for the cloud, then you can go with the cloud infrastructure. That is the best option. If a client is not ready to pay the bill amount, then we need to go with the on-prem infrastructure only. It depends on your budget.
Okay.
But safety-wise, security-wise, availability-wise, cloud infrastructure is always better than on-prem infrastructure. On-prem means you are responsible for everything.
Okay, for database backup and
Yes,
security, and
everything
for
you need to take care.
okay, I think getting the public domain. Okay,
Yes.
you're okay, putting everything. Okay, okay, thank you.
Ashok, is
Ashok,
it
sir.
possible?
Hi,
Yeah, go
yes.
ahead.
Is it possible to increase the database size after being created?
Is it possible to?
Increase the database
Yes, sir. You
size.
can change the whenever we create a database by using RDS, internally they will use one EC2 instance only to maintain our database. That is T2
Okay.
Micro. We are using free type. You can change the instance type to the large instances also to get the more memory, more size. You can change it. Whatever the configuration you use, based on that charges are applicable.
Sir, once if we create EC2 instance, is it possible to change the
Yes, sir. You
configuration?
can change the instance type. If you go for the action, there is the option to change the instance type also.
Okay.
So let's assume currently I have database on premises, and I realize it is a cost effective to go for cloud.
Mhm.
So the migration, how would be the migration process? Is it
Migration, nothing,
difficult?
sir. So for every database, import, export options will be available. Some ETL tools will be available. Whatever the database you have in the on-prem, same database you can export into CSV file, and that can be imported into the cloud database. Import, export options will be there. Database administrator people will do that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
So, Ashok, sir,
Yes.
I have a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I created load balance, but that URL is not hitting, but the both the instances are hitting URL.
Sure, sir. We will check that, sir. Today, I will be free after 2 o'clock. Then I will check it, or else tomorrow morning I will check your issue. Okay. You send me a
Okay,
message in the group so that I will respond. After 2 o'clock, I will be free. Then we can connect.
okay, thanks.
Hi, Ashok sir.
Yeah. Hello.
Can you please let me know how we can access the backup videos? Actually, I'm trying to access those videos, but I can able to see this message while accessing. I'm sharing that message on chat. it is directly redirecting to the login page.
Yeah, you can go to the Google account, you can log in with you are enrolled
Yeah.
from the backup videos plan.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you talk to admin team, so admin team will guide you how to access it. Okay.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.